There are dire warnings that New South Wales will be hit by increasingly extreme weather.
2015 was the hottest year since climate records began.
Your show this July was the single hottest month in recorded history.
Australia sweltered through its hottest spring on record.
Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent.
It's the rate that's of great concern.
And what do you put that rate down to?
Oh, it's human activity.
We have everything we need. Some still doubt that we have the will to act, but I say the will to act is itself a renewable resource.
Hello and welcome to Climactic. But today's episode is not a work of the Climactic Collective. Normally, this show is where you can find the best of the other shows on the Climactic Collective, our podcast network. But sometimes we also shine a light on the other great media engaging with the climate crisis, or other aspects of life in these climactic times. And today's episode is one of those. A show from the community, but also a community show itself. Broadcast on 3CR Community Radio in Narm, Melbourne, and called the Beyond Zero Emissions Community Show. Now in its 10th year, the community show has been there for the people who ask, so what are the solutions to all these problems they're telling us about? They've visited farming, forestry, and coal mining communities, financiers and filmmakers, politicians and high-speed rail and electric vehicle buffs, to chronicle the transition that is a race against time. We're thrilled to be connected with Vivian and her team, and we can't wait to bring you more cool stuff as we begin to collaborate. The Experienced Hands, and the Upstart Podcast Collective. Today's episode of Transition and Solutions takes us to Bangladesh, the front lines of the changed climate. And if you'd like to learn more about the world from a South Asian perspective, we're happy to announce Them Power, the newest show to join the Climactic Collective. Co-hosts Manit and Upeksha are young women who've grown up in Australia but are tackling the lack of South Asian voices and perspectives. They've covered topics from global warming, Australia's offshore refugee detention policy, confronting racism, rape culture, and recently COVID-19. But there's even more to be found in their nearly 20 episodes. Find the show on our website, climactic.com.au, or thempower.org. That's THEMPOWER.org. And now, enjoy this episode of the BZE Community Show.
This is David Rovics, and you are tuned to 3CR 8:55 AM, Melbourne, Australia. Step 3 is finding there's a tactic when everyone believes it could be true. That if all the people work collectively, there just might be something we can do, and everything can change.
Welcome to the Beyond Zero Emissions Community Show. My name is Vivian Langford and Salut Babette. We are broadcasting from 3CR in Melbourne, and we will be heard in Sydney at Radio Skid Row. So Andy and I would like to pay our respects to the elders past and present of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. This is episode 1 in a new series from the Frontlines of climate catastrophe. In Bangladesh, there are frequent floods and cyclones. People used to die in their thousands, like this desperate man, recorded by Maqubul, as his house is swept away by one of the 1,000 rivers. I think this is like an I can't breathe moment. Heavy rain and winds make many places inaccessible, and we talked to the founder of a floating hospital called Friendship. Her name is Runa Khan, and you will find her as inspiring as Martin Luther King. It's not just about saving lives, she says, but giving back people's dignity. And we, in the high emissions world, can be partners in that by learning from them, not just sending a cheque in a crisis, but being real partners. It's just like you subscribe to 3CR as a partner with us in providing independent media. You can learn about people on the front lines of climate disruptions and do everything you can to stop Australia's emissions and exported emissions in coal and gas. We have only 25 million people, yet we are responsible for 1.28% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Bangladesh, with 160 million people, emits less than 1%. Our second Bangladeshi expert is eminent scientist Dr. Saleemul. He tells us about the damage to the Sundarban forest, how supercyclone Amphan was caused by heating the surface temperature on the Bay of Bengal. He says the response to COVID-19 by governments who listened to the science saved lives, and he cites New Zealand as being very good at that. The response to climate change, he says, needs to be the same. Go in early, go in hard, and do not leave vulnerable people behind. So think of that. Our response to COVID, it may have been patchy, but we can improve that for climate change. Go in early, go in hard, do not leave vulnerable people behind. Whereas Runa Khan is a spirited speaker, Dr. Saleemul is very calm, but both have fiery words that will open your heart. These people have no time for despair and powerlessness like so many of us in rich Australia. Runa is expecting 5 new hospital ships to be delivered soon, and the millions of people trained to warn people about cyclones and floods are now going around with loud hailers in the villages, wearing masks and delivering a COVID pandemic health message. They are really well organised, and I've heard that Bangladesh is really a model for being on the front foot with adaptation to crisis. This is one of the most inspirational shows I've done. I so enjoyed talking to both of these people. Tonight we're going to Bangladesh in the wake of super cyclone Amphan. We've heard before that Bangladesh is a leader in adaptation to the awful conditions created by climate disruption. In the 1990s, a cyclone left 10 million people homeless and killed 140,000 people. Last year, Cyclone Fani only killed 17 people, I think, and 2.5 million people were safely evacuated. Our guest tonight will be Miss Runa Khan. She's the founder of a not-for-profit organisation called Friendship. It started literally with a barge that was turned into a hospital ship. So welcome, Runa. Tell us about the remote river islands. People in Australia won't know this geography very well unless they've travelled to your country. I'd like to know how you had the idea to take services to those people eking out a living there.
Thank you very much, Vivian. I'm very pleased to be with you this evening. So I need to describe Bangladesh a little bit to you. Bangladesh is a country of 1,000 rivers. All right, you have 3 of the largest rivers in the world, which is the Brahmaputra, as the Jamuna, the Ganges, which flows in as the Padma and the Meghna. And Bangladesh is built on silt. The average of Bangladesh, the average height of Bangladesh is, they say 10 meters, but that's including the very narrow strip of hill tracts. So if you take away the hill tracts, the country is between 3 to 5 meters high. You have tidal waves which come nearly more than center, of the country. So as I said, the whole country is built on silt and we don't have rocks. So when the mighty Himalaya, from the mighty Himalayas, the river Brahmaputra comes into Bangladesh, no rocks, it comes in sometimes at 10 to 12 knots. So you can imagine what devastation it can cause, these rivers, on the silt land. A river can become 30 kilometers in breadth. So you can hold the city of Paris between its 2 banks. And in that, and on that river, you have these river islands, all silt built. And the river islands are broken and redone year after year. Now it's all right if you have a population of 1 million people in the country. This is a population of 170 million people who don't have places to stay. So continuously the people are migrating, the islands are migrating, and you are shifting. And so about 20 years ago, when I went into these river islands, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that people were actually able to survive, with, holding their lives, their livelihood, their assets, everything in their hands. And that is what they were doing. And, people were shifting. They were continuously, they were migrating island to island or island to the cities. And within that, I realized that they were so forgotten because nobody was coming to these islands because they were just too difficult to manage. Services were too difficult to manage. And stepping back, when you have nothing, what is the first thing you need to do? You need to ensure that people don't suffer. And for me, saving lives became the kind of, was the only focus I had in my life to ensure that people did not suffer and I could save lives. And hence I started with the first, we are the pioneer in the world, actually, they say, of NGO mobile hospitals ships. And so we started with the first mobile hospital ships and built the system from there.
Right.
100% of the friendship work, just to say 100% of the friendship work and the communities we deal with, 100% are all either internally displaced people by climate action, or they are the refugees coming from the Rohingya country, from Myanmar. So we have refugees, 100% of our people, the beneficiaries.
Let's stick with the hospital idea. I think you also have river ambulances as well. But what happens on those hospital ships? And now, especially as we're in a pandemic and you've just had another cyclone.
Yes. So I need to describe a little bit on the friendship healthcare system. So, when you have a hospital ship or you have a mobile unit, in a way, people think that that's the end of it. It's not the end of it, because suppose you've done an operation, or as we are doing, we're treating cervical cancer, or we are with an EPI, extended immunization for children. What do you do when you have to do follow-ups? So we could not only have the hospital ships. So the hospital ships were there, and we had to take care of the people surrounding, because that was our responsibility also. And so we built a 3-tier healthcare system. The hospital ships are the tier 1. The satellite clinics and the static clinics, which are land-based clinics or mobile clinics, were tier 2. And tier 3 were the community workers that we trained and empowered so that they could continue delivery of services even when we were not there, all linked together with the mHealth and algorithm-based software. So this is the 3-tier system of friendship. Coming back to the hospital ships, so each hospital ship that we've got 2 now. We had 3, but now it's 2 because the Greenpeace boat, the Rainbow Warrior, we had for about 6 years, but that was a bit old. And we are going to get 5 new hospital ships this year. They're all under construction. So the hospital ships have got, they are actually equipped as secondary tier, up to secondary tier as a full-fledged unit. So the people will stand outside in a line. They come in group by group. They are registered. Then they are sent to the specific doctor that they have to go to. And we have got dental care, general care, of course, women and children care. We have a strong cervical cancer unit for screening and also doing the first level of care. And we have very good pathology on all the hospital ships and 2 operation theatres.
Well, you said in the webinar that saving lives is not enough. And I really sat up when you said that. You said saving lives is not enough. What is your way of, you said you put down roots with people. It's not just a Band-Aid service where you come in a crisis. Yeah. You want to make long-lasting connections with those people, but then you float away. Your boat sails away somewhere. So what is your way of putting down roots in those communities so that they can face climate disasters, which are becoming more frequent?
One reply is saving lives is not enough, because you save a life and the person can die of an infection after you've saved their life, or they cannot get food after you've saved their life, or they are socially so ostracized that they can't stand up with dignity. That is also gone. So, you need to address things holistically. In a community which has access to nothing, not even a road or not even electricity or a shop, you need to address all the difficulties together. And a migratory community, which is our climate impacted communities and migrations, which we are, as I said, we are dealing with 6.5 million people every year, and they're all migratory people in some way or the other, and for them, we needed to ensure that, one, besides saving lives, also not only in health, but also when there was a climate disaster, which means in a climate disaster, it's preparedness. The millions of people who could be saved because of in spite of the cyclones coming, but because they were prepared, people like us and the government, we prepared them that when the cyclone warning comes, these are the steps you have to follow to go to these cyclone shelters, how to take your cows, or when the land is breaking, what do you do? You see, or when the storm comes in, how do you protect and ensure that your houses don't blow away so easily? When a bad cyclone comes, everything blows away. Their houses don't stay; they have to move. But for a normal when you have 1, 2, 3, 4 cyclones calling, then you can tie up your house and fix up your place, and you can survive. And it's extremely important for preparedness. So we do a lot of preparedness, we do relief, and even the community. We have something which is community-initiated disaster risk reduction, where we link the communities amongst themselves. All the communities we work with, they know that they have to, how many widows are there, or how many old people are there, and pregnant people are there, and they know what to do. They know the phone calls. They have. Sometimes they ensure that they have planted enough banana plants so that they can make a raft and go if they don't have a boat. You see, so to a degree, and for swimming, of course, when the floods come in, you can't swim, but normal disasters, we do a lot of swimming training. Then we do then we also, so we prepare them what to do in case, and also to save food when the disaster, when the floods are kind of up to their roof. So how to save food, what is the kind of food they can save, how to come back again, and how to access government services. All this is linked, together for saving lives.
The next thing I want to ask you is about education. And you do a lot of education, a huge amount, through theatre groups, through TV, through YouTube channels. Now, Australian listeners will know about this now because we're under lockdown for the coronavirus. And so we're all learning. Children have to do by distant learning because of that, but do it all the time to these remote people, and also classrooms for adult learners as well. And I think this is a huge job, but you put in a code of ethics and dignity. You emphasize that something like that has to be at the center. And I'd like to know, what results do you see from this ethics and dignity education and all the rest of the other sorts of education? What results do you see, especially for women and girls?
So, Vivian, when I started schools, these were areas where teachers couldn't come, and actually there was no one taking, doing high schools in these areas, when we started our schools here 20 years ago. And we needed to ensure that we take into account the geography of that area. And this is, I think, one of the key of the way we work. There are two essential threads of anything friendship does. One is ensuring that we take into account the geography and nature. This is something we learned 20 years ago, that you could not fight. You had to accept that there's a specificity, and you needed to fit whatever you could within that specificity. Second was human rights. Because if you do not imbue and nurture and bring out the essential sense of value that a human being has, you are actually not equipping them for the future. So for example, in a disaster, I tell all my volunteers, we've got thousands of volunteers going for disasters, and in a disaster, that I tell them that do not take away more than what you are giving. You're giving them a bag of rice, et cetera, whatever. You're giving them a bag of rice. But if you do this in a way where they lose their self-respect, for example, throwing it at them, shouting at them, etc., you are taking away more than what you're giving them. And never do this. It's unacceptable, because then that is the true sustainability of a project. That is where, when you touch those. So for me, education was a very important factor. Now, education, I could equip, we could try to equip these children with, linking them with the government system. It was impossible to teach them, Montessori systems or anything like, So we had to go in for mass, because there were millions of children, thousands and thousands of children in all these areas. So we needed to find a very simple system which could be replicated. And, so it's schools which can be brought down. Teachers are women from the community whom we train to be teachers, and they are linked to us. Initially, we were having trainings. Now we are doing it through the computers. And this would only be all right up to the primary level, but at the secondary level, you needed good teachers. So we have a recording studio in Dhaka, and we only had facilitators who were, teaching the children, who were there with the children whilst they learned from online. Now, this is, okay, so this was good. Now let's go back to code of ethics, and then I'll link it up. When we started, I knew that I needed to equip these children in the best way possible, and best way being not only academics, because, you can be very good in academics, you can do nothing with your life. This happens, that you've fallen through the gap somewhere, or you've not had, either you are not strong enough to push that little bit of strength that you have. So I needed to build characters. And what is character building? For me, the most essential component is nurturing human values within the person. And so we started this code of ethics. And this is something which now, not only in our children, but all the lives we touch, the 6.5 million lives we touch a year, this is something which is in the forefront of every meeting, of every communication. And so I'll tell you a little story on this. So one day we had, this was quoted by one of our teachers, just like that as a story, I once was talking to them, that he was passing somewhere and it was near a river, and it was raining. It was, well, not a river, sorry. It was a little stream, and he was just passing that, and it was raining. There was an old couple who was standing there, and this old couple said that, he said that, please bring me that little boat, to another group of children who were in that area. Please bring me that little boat. We want to cross. And the kids were not listening at all. They were playing. And the old man got so mad. He said, I know you're not friendship children. If you were friendship children, you, without me asking you, would have brought the boat to me and helped me to cross. This is like so beautiful for me to hear that, that we have given them something. And these children, every day we see, how they have developed in character and strength and courage. So it has been a very important thing to ensure that even when the government is using our YouTube channels, etc., I managed to put in that value, of the month in the code of ethics.
Well, another thing about education is training people, and I imagine a lot of those river communities are off the grid, and they're even remote from feeling like citizens. It sounds like, they don't get any government services. They probably don't really feel they have any rights. But I wonder, does friendship do anything with getting solar power to those people and training them to maintain the equipment? If you're not in a remote place, it happens in Australia too, remote communities have to have their own, solar power. So do you help with that?
Thank you, Vivian. What you have touched is how responsible are you to ensuring that what you have sold to a poor person, you are continuing the service. This is actually the crux of your question, It's not only for solar powers, we try to do this for everything. So regarding solar power, we brought in light into these islands. and it could only be done through solar power. So we have installed thousands of panels, and most of them, 90% of the panel, they are repaying us back. Of course, we have given some free to the ultra poor of very, So our thing was that, what we wanted to do was ensure that the price of a lamp, which they were using, which is health-wise, etc., could be compensated by one light at the same cost. So that was the technique, that was the idea that we went in. And we found that as years passed, they were wanting more than one light. They were wanting 2 lights and 5 lights and 10 lights, pans and a little, a little TV or something. And of course, charging their phones. But in every island, like it is with the solars, also for our livestock, the cattle, the livestock loans that we gave, or the field, we always, or in the field, for agriculture or fishing, we never just give the loan and come away. We ensure that in that community there is one para-vet. So we've got these para-vets in every place that we have given a loan for a cow or a goat. We started the first parasolar technician trainings in the country. And even to when we do government work, we train the people as parasolar technicians, community people who can repair, and they know where to buy the parts from. Many of them have set up shops, and they have. It's amazing the way human beings can develop. And linking one of our sectors is inclusive citizenship, which is linked with empowerment. Inclusive citizenship is where we deal with deep social issues, human rights and issues. So we have these groups in each village, many, everybody more or less is linked to this group. And these are, and we have a parasolar, and we have a paralegal aid. So right now, I think there's 75 islands in which we have got paralegal aids that we train. They go through extensive legal training with us, though they are themselves, they have not even passed high school. Most of them have not even passed high school. And they have their own little paralegal booths, and the whole community works with them. Now, this is again, I would say, the quality is one of our values. If you do not work with very good quality and you go to a remote island and start telling them the laws, I mean, the husband, if you tell the husband, or the wife turns around and tells the husband, you can't do that, the husband can kill the wife if he wants, or throw her away. And, that's it. So you've actually destroyed more. So these, slowly over the years, we ensured that these paralegals had that acceptability in the community, and then acceptability in the government. And now our paralegal aides are really an accepted community member of the district courts. So they write, they can write an issue that's happening, or put up a case which is accepted in the district courts. And this for me is very important, and through them and also through our other members, we link them up to the government services. Because friendship can be there today, tomorrow, you never know. We are, after all, only an organization. We mustn't be so vain to think that we'll always exist, but it's one organization, but they have to get linked to the government services. And that is what we do very, very strongly. And well, it's so positive what you're saying. I keep thinking this is, I don't want to give the wrong impression to the listeners that it's all fantastic in your country, because every year, as you said, you're getting more of these climate disasters. And when I spoke to Dr. Saleemul, I mean, the listeners will remember he's a famous climate scientist. He's at the United Nations all the time arguing for, compensation and for help, proper help, but not just a handout, but more for ongoing structured help. But what I was most impressed with him, it was by his compassion for the Rohingya refugees who had just then come across. We were just getting the little bit of news about these floods of millions, really now 1 million people, I think now, came across from Myanmar, and they're still there, I believe. So they've been through several cyclones, a pandemic, and he just showed such
positivity and compassion, it really showed up all the other countries in the world that are not kind to refugees, notably Australia and, many parts of Europe too. They're very not as willing to. He said, we will educate them. We will look after them until they find a way back to their citizenship in their own country. And it was just such an eye-opener to meet his attitude, which is a little bit like the way you're talking. But how does friendship help people like that? But how do you get Europeans and outsiders to help you with this problem? That's the most unfair thing, that you're suffering the climate change that we're causing by over, the emissions intensive countries, and also by the refugee situation. That's just an incredible burden for your country, and yet you're facing it with a smile. What can you say about that?
Vivian, when you see pain and suffering every day, I have had a woman coming to me with a child, held in her arms with cerebral palsy, and telling me in the chores that the local doctor, the quack, has said, I can't do anything with this child. Should I kill the child? That's real story. I have seen women who takes care of their husband and leaves, the husband had, it's like leprosy. It's called, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name, but it's something like leprosy. And so she would leave the husband there with a bit of rice and lentils, walk to Dhaka, which is the city, the town. It would take her 3 days, beg on the streets and go back and feed that husband, And poverty level was like this. And in many places it's like that. So these are people that when I'm talking with a smile, Bangladesh is a country of 170 million people. 45% are still below poverty line. How do they deal? How are they prepared for dealing with one wave which comes and takes everything away? It is, you see this every single day. You see this. All you can do is ensure that they have the strength to survive and live. Their resilience, their courage, this is what you can imbue, and why I spoke so strongly on how we try to imbue this in the people, that you can live. Because it's something which we face every day. And this I think and after this is access to services, which will strengthen you. Because if your health is bad, you can't get enough to eat. How are you going to survive? How are you going to survive when the storms come in and everything is broken and taken away in front of your eyes? What strength you need? You see, this is the first time that that in a crisis like Bangladesh suffers every year several times. Today, the world is suffering with one issue. Bangladesh is suffering issue after issue, disaster after disaster, several times a year. And it's not our contribution really to the world, the global climate issue, but we are the sufferers. We have to learn to adapt, otherwise we will not survive. And this is what we have to do. Now for the Rohingyas, the day the Rohingyas came in, we were there. We are the largest local health organization with the Rohingyas. We have about 200, 250 schools in the Rohingya camps. We've got, we've done health, water, sanitation, bathroom, whatever. I say it easily, but I remember the time when the Rohingyas came in. Vivian, we had never seen this happen. Friendship has brought children down from trees when the cyclones came. I have seen with my own eyes children swept away, when the floods came in, and we could do nothing for the child. The child was gone before I could even get the speedboat, to go after the child. Even then, when the Rohingyas came in, the pain, it was incredible. I told my staff, I said, don't listen to stories, because then you can't function. I couldn't function if I started listening to stories. I said, you can't, because every time you think you have dealt with catastrophes, in that catastrophe, what do you say? Okay, God has done it. And the end, when a cyclone comes, we are still saying God has done it, So, but here you can get angry because you can see the villages burning on the other side. You see, we were standing on this side near Teknaf, and you could see the villages burning on that side. You cannot, I don't know how to explain this. We work with compassion. We have to work with empathy. Our staff has to work with courage. It broke us, in that rain. I remember going down in that rain, walking on the streets, with rain and all the refugees all around, trying to just figure out what to do, where to start. And it has been extremely difficult. Of course, in spite of whatever the world says, it has been Bangladesh, Vivian, who has taken these refugees in. The government has taken them in, and the government is feeding them, of course, with the World Health, because you see the chores, that is also our condition. That is also our reality. So we have both on two sides. Tell me, what can you do but smile? Because if you don't smile, you don't get courage to continue for tomorrow. We have to smile.
Wow. Well, the last thing is, I forgot to ask you about the boat building. There's also something in the training of people. You were trying to resuscitate traditional crafts that were, traditional.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. Some people would love to hear about that.
So I am often called the boat lady, which is kind of a bit political, but it's not at all the thing. This is like 20 years ago, even 25 years ago. So, Bangladesh has the largest fleet of inland boats in the world once upon a time, wooden boats in the world. And the technology has come down verbally for more than 5,000 years. And nobody has recorded it, and it's a unique technology which is known as a smooth skin boat building. And each area, each river in Bangladesh, due to communication difficulties, develop their own kind of, not technology as much as designs of different boats. So the technology of boat is based, inland river boats, is basically the smooth skin boat with more than 130 different or more, you don't exactly know the numbers, more than 120, 30 kinds of different designs. And these had suddenly, when my ex-husband and I used to sail on the rivers, because I loved boats, and he actually loved boats, and he put that into me. And we used to sail on the rivers, and we used to see these boats every year disappearing, less and less boats. And we suddenly realized that the people that I later started working with, their one single thing which links them all is the culture of the rivers. And the culture of the rivers, the boat for them is their story. The boats are their songs. Boats are their livelihood. It was so important, that we do something about the boats. So first we started personally doing it. And then I realized personally it was going to get impossible because I had friendship on one side and then it was a bit difficult. So then I said, if we are trying to bring human identity and dignity, we cannot ignore the human culture. Culture is extremely important. That is what brings dignity and identity to a community. And that is what gives them strength. So we do this cultural preservation of the boats of Bangladesh, which are totally unique. We had to do something because I think it is with the boats that I realized that as soon as you realize that they're going away, and you are the only one who has realized this, or, your little group is the only one, you have a responsibility. You see, you can't run away from that responsibility anymore. So I say this realization leads to a responsibility, and we had to do something. And so we started and they're beautiful. You should see them.
I'm going to put some pictures on this is a podcast, this will be audio only. And I wish the listeners could see you because you're so animated. There's like a little lovely television screen here. But I'll put the photos of the boats on our webpage. The main thing that came across from you was be prepared, this message, be prepared. Yeah. Nothing would faze you because you've got warehouses full of face masks and you've got, equipment for rice bags. You've prepared. You are fully aware. And that was the main idea that got through to me. And you were talking to people in Europe on that webinar. There were a lot of donors there. And you talked a little bit about the pandemic, that now the whole world has got this one shared suffering. You're getting the suffering all the time, but we're sharing this one thing in the world. and you said to them, there's a way of giving that's a responsible donor. You have to be a responsible donor.
Yeah.
Like you said, you don't throw the bag of rice at people and take away their dignity. And I have a feeling that you would like, and I think Dr. Saleemul had the same idea, you would like people to be really partners with you and to be responsible donors. And I'd like to know just to finish, what can we learn about a more dignified partnership in climate action? It's not going away. Climate change is really accelerating. And so we need to partner with you.
Thank you. Just to mention that Dr. Saleemul is an advisor to Friendship on Climate Issues. So we are very honored for that and very happy to have him with us. So yes, as I said that, you see, donors and donee, somehow there is a question of having more knowledge and money on one side and less on the other. Now, this needs to be a partnership where we do, the intrinsic knowledge which you have at the field level. So let's put it, the donors vis-a-vis friendship, friendship vis-a-vis the community. It's exactly the same. If we do not work in deep and true understanding together with the community, we will never be able to make a project which is long-term and sustainable. In the same way, if we do not have donors who understand the issues and problems that their partners are facing, you cannot have a sustainable relationship or an output from a project or an impact of a project which is deep and sustainable. We need climate change, climate action, climate crisis is a word which is for many countries, well, for Mr. Trump and many others, maybe it doesn't exist, but but it is a climate, it's really an issue for tomorrow, for many of them, it's for issue that can happen, cannot. But I would say now, today, 90% of everyone understands it. Everyone realizes it, and everyone wants to do something. Equality, this can happen when there is more equality in the world and there is more responsibility in the world and more solidarity. Because countries, it doesn't matter. India, Bangladesh, Burma, and it's all the same. It's a region. You know what I mean? When the cyclone strikes, it can be with anybody. When the water level rises, it's for anybody. It's not Sicily and Italy, or it's not, it's all one. So this solidarity you need to internalize. Now, there are some mitigation things which are certain people's responsibility. Certain countries, certain organizations, certain leaders. There are things the leaders can do. There are things companies can do. There are things we at the field level can do. And then there are things individuals can do. Every one of us has this responsibility. And we need to understand this and work with that. But none of us, if the individual doesn't do it, the organizations like ours don't do it, it doesn't go up. Stretching it all, we need respect. In the same way, we need to respect nature. You see, we have created a world where wants, needs, are capitalism, it's so, for me, that is what we are all striving towards. If we look, are we giving the right of the birds the rights? Are we giving the animals their rights? Are we giving the rivers their rights? Are we giving the trees their rights? All of us have equal rights in this world. We are all part of nature. Human beings are also part of nature. And we tend to forget that, in our strives, of betterment and more. I think this is something which needs to be ingrained in us. I think this needs to, as an individual, as an organization, as a leader, we need to face this. We need countries which have less need help, because they are not always responsible, for this climate crisis which is happening. Yeah. I am not saying that we only need money or this or that. We need understanding and we need solutions as to what to do. If that solution involves money, be it money. If that solution involves migration, then it's migration. You see, we need that understanding because the world is one. We have, as everybody says, no plan B, it's planet B. So it's one, and we need the solidarity to exist in our minds. in our behaviors, because in our mind does not happen, in our actions, from the individual to the politicians, to the leaders, to the corporate houses. Greed cannot drive us, No. We cannot be driven by that. It is going to spoil the planet.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Runa. I respect you. I think, between you and Dr. Saleemul Haq, I've never heard such sparkling, positivity and can-do attitude and innovation and all of that. It's just sparkles out of you. And look at your geography. When I look at the map, I think you're just the end of the line with the great Himalayan glaciers melting down, and you just get that full force as you described at the very beginning. You need everybody to be on your side, and I hope a lot of listeners will look up your website and they can just press a donate button, or they can really get involved, as you said. So thank you very much.
You.
Friendship.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you for the solidarity.
Thank you. That was Runa Khan from an organisation called Friendship.
3CR is your station in solidarity and struggle.
We've been with you since 1976 and we are here to stay.
We're running a station appeal.
We need the financial support of our listeners to stay independent, community-owned and radical.
Jump online and give what you can. Go to 3cr.org.au.
Now we'll hear a small part of Dr. Saleemul Haq's talk on a webinar I attended with IED from UK. It's called Climate, COVID-19 and the Collaboration We Need.
So let me start by sharing a few of my thoughts from where I am located here in Dhaka, Bangladesh, about the link between COVID-19, which is now still a major problem here in Dhaka. We're still in lockdown, working from home over the last month and continuing to do that. But the fact that even though we have this public health pandemic on our heads at the moment, it doesn't mean that climate change has gone away. Climate change is still there. And we were reminded of that fact just a couple of weeks ago here when we had a super cyclone Amphan hit, fortunately for Bangladesh, it hit India first and then came to Bangladesh, but it still did a lot of damage. Fortunately, not many lives lost because we have a very, very good emergency warning system and people took shelter. More than 2.5 million people were able to get the warnings and take shelter so that the lives lost was minimized. But nevertheless, there was a lot of damage done, particularly to the Sundarban forest, which got hit first, and then that also protected the human habitation, but there was a lot of damage to the forest, the flora and the fauna there. And so, and the fact that cyclones are not new, cyclones happen every year, but this happened to be a super cyclone because the Bay of Bengal sea surface temperature was elevated by over a degree. And I understand that the Indian government has just launched a climate satellite where they're now monitoring these temperatures on a regular basis, and they have verified the fact that the Bay of Bengal temperature was elevated above normal, which turned it into a super cyclone, which we rarely get. Normally, we get normal cyclones, we don't get super cyclones. So this was a particularly bad one in that sense, and we're likely to get more of them. So the bottom line is that climate change continues, climate change impacts continue, and even though we have a COVID-19 crisis at the moment, we're going to have to deal with both crises at the same time, a public health crisis on the one hand, a climate change crisis on the other hand, and an economic crisis as a result of that as well. And so to me, just to share a few thoughts of my own coming out of this. Firstly, to me, one of the biggest lessons that the COVID-19 pandemic, global pandemic has brought to us is the necessity of leaders to listen to the scientists. And we have a vivid demonstration of leaders who listen to the scientists, who have protected their populations. For example, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, where Achala is now sitting, who are now COVID-free, and the leaders of several countries, including the richest and most powerful country in the world, who refuse to listen to their scientists and are responsible for the deaths of thousands of their own citizens. I can't, think of anything worse as a decision maker of these leaders. And he's not the only one. There are several others as well around the world, which I won't name, but we know who they are. And they have, by ignoring the science, killed their own citizens. And that is really unconscionable. And climate change is another one. Climate change scientists have been saying this for a long time, and they aren't listening. They have to listen if they really want to help their own countries going forward. The second, I think, emphasis of example that or lesson that is being conveyed is we live in a globalized world. There is no way to put walls and barriers around your country. You can try to do it, but you're not going to do it. It's not going to be effective. The pandemic goes around the world, the virus goes across borders, and Bangladesh will also be affected, as every other country will be affected, and we will need to work with each other. So whether we like it or not, the only way to take our ideas forward and to come out of this crisis is to work together, is to cooperate, collaborate, share knowledge and experience, and help each other, as it were. And then the third and final point I will make is with regard to who gets affected. And you mentioned a little earlier that the work I've been doing at IIED, and I continue to do, is focusing on the impacts of climate change on the most vulnerable communities in the most vulnerable countries, particularly the least developed countries in Asia and Africa. As it happens, the pandemic and particularly the lockdown measures in the big cities like Dhaka and Mumbai and Cape Town and Nairobi are affecting the most vulnerable communities in the slums in these big cities right now, who are also going to be the victims of the impacts of climate change. So it's a double whammy for them, in the sense of the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change are also the most vulnerable to the COVID-19. And therefore, the corollary of that is anything we do to deal with the pandemic and the economic recovery has to take into account not just a green recovery or a green future, but also an equitable recovery where we take care of the most vulnerable. To me, just being green is not good enough, although I support green investments and recovery, but green has to be also equitable, where we think of not leaving anyone behind, thinking of the most vulnerable, and enabling us to support them and to be able to help them going forward. So I think the challenge has become bigger, but the need for our collaboration has also become that much bigger as well.
Thank you very much, Saleem. Very, very rich comments. You mentioned some countries have handled this better than others. They're mostly the countries that went early. So it wasn't so much about how you locked down, it was about when you did. And in my country, the UK, there's an estimate from an eminent epidemiologist that 20,000 lives would have been saved had the UK locked down a week earlier. So that thing about exponential growth. Now, there's a lesson there, isn't there? Because we've all been saying for a long time that there isn't enough urgency in acting on the climate crisis. But that urgency has to be found in a global framework, not a national framework. Do you have any thoughts about how we can apply that lesson? Is it possible?
Yes. So I think the COVID-19 crisis in itself is a good illustration of that. As you've just said, this is now self-evident. Those who moved first, listened to the science and moved first, were able to protect their citizens, their own citizens. And those who came late were not. And in fact, I hold them responsible for those deaths, because they refused to take action. And we can make the same case for climate change on a much bigger scale, unfortunately on a slower time scale. So it's not immediate like the COVID crisis is. And so you don't have to lock down and sit in your house for weeks, but you do have to be better prepared. And I hope that that would be one of the biggest lessons that our leaders will take on board. And, going up to COP26 now, the UK is in the presidency of that. I would say the UK bears a big responsibility in taking that message to other leaders around the world and ensuring that climate change is not dropped off the agenda. It is made a high priority, and the lesson being, those of you who will move quickly will be better off than those of you who leave it till later. And that is the big lesson. And again, just to pick up on our role in all of this, I think we have a big role to play in terms of getting the evidence and putting it together in a global context, and not just speaking to our own national leaders, but the global leaders collectively. And in the past, I think we have not done as good a job as we should be doing, and particularly in the sort of global think tank world, if you like, it's still very predominantly northern think tanks with a few, of us in the South as token voices, I would say. We need to do better than that. We need to have a much more rounded group of institutions and people working together in a much more solid form of solidarity and producing the evidence that speaks to all our leaders in different ways. And Fatima's quite right. The messages are not exactly, it's not a one-size-fits-all message. It is disaggregated messages. But there is a one-size-fits-all overall message of tackling a global problem like climate change that requires everybody to be doing something, but the something that everybody does can be different in different places for different people. And that's really, I think, an opportunity for us as think tanks and researchers.
Thank you very much, Saleem. Great answer.
You're listening to the Beyond Zero Emissions show, and the speaker is Dr. Saleemul from Bangladesh. One of the audience asked if it was a good idea to merge the UK Department for International Development, DFID, with the Foreign Office.
I think it's a bad move, that's for sure. The fact that DFID was an independent department with a Secretary of State, with a cabinet rank, made a huge difference for the UK's aid budget to be ring-fenced to tackle global poverty and humanitarian issues, which Mr. Johnson obviously does not like, and he wants it to be subordinated to political interests. And, in his speech in Parliament, he calls it the great cash point in the sky, which is, extremely derogatory view of development assistance, and why Ukraine shouldn't get more than Zambia. If he doesn't know the difference between poverty in Zambia and Ukraine, I have no faith in him being the person in charge of what to do best with money that's supposed to help the poor. On the other hand, in the climate change context, I am not really that disappointed. I would prefer the UK to give their climate obligations, climate finance obligations, to the world that they have agreed to under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And I really don't care if they want to reduce aid to zero. Let them do that. That's their business. Shut DFID down. What does it matter to us? But give the money that you have to give us under climate change. That is an obligation that we will hold you to. Aid is not an obligation. Aid is just charity that you decided you want to give, and you don't want to give it, don't give it. But climate finance you have to give, and we will fight you for that. Thank you.
ওরা আল্লাহ রাখছেন মানুষের রাখছে দোয়ায় মানুষের খেতে করি যায় আমার এখন জীবনটা যায় পানির বাগন।
Thanks to our guests, Runa Khan and Dr. Saleemul. Thank you to Kate Preston and Radia Salim and the people who invited me to the webinar where I met them. We are keeping our eyes on the front lines of climate change, and as I said, this is episode 1 in a series about reporting from the front lines of climate change. And some of them are in Australia. We can learn a lot about being prepared, going in early, going in hard, and bringing emissions to zero. A big part of Beyond Zero emissions work is actually making roadmaps for that, working very hard in the community to make sure it happens, as they're doing in Bangladesh. I'd also like to thank Michaela, Andy and Raoul for getting this show to air. My name is Vivian Langford. Tune in next Monday at 5 p.m. Good night and good luck.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to Climactic, the flagship podcast of the Climactic Collective, a podcast network dedicated to lifting the voices of the climate community. You can find out more about the people behind Climactic and all the shows we produce at climactic.fm. We are a social enterprise podcast network, and we greatly appreciate your support. You can find a link to our Possible where you can support us directly in the show notes of this episode or from our website. Thank you for listening, and from the whole Climactic Collective, keep up the great work and take care of each other in these climactic times.
The Climactic Collective.